Welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today we're going to talk about my 1971 Citroën DS. This car premiered back in, I believe, October of 1955, and it remains to this day the most innovative car ever designed, the most unusual car ever designed, a car with more different features than any other car. You know, some cars would have one little feature, but everything else would be pretty standard. This is totally new, totally original thinking, and just totally French. This was designed by André Lebrev. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm not good with these French names. And a gentleman named Paul Mages, M-A-G-E-S, I think it was. He was the first one. Paul was the first one to come up with the idea of using fluid under pressure as a spring. You know, prior to this car, everybody used shock absorbers or springs. And the idea of using fluid as a spring, well, it just didn't happen. The genesis for this car was actually pre-war, and then they hid it from the Germans during the occupation of France, and then after the war, they worked on it. To this day, it still looks like a car of the future. You know, a lot of times you'll see movies from the 80s or 90s that show the future, and they show people driving by in one of these, because even though it was designed back in '55, it still looks futuristic. It's so unusual. The front track is wider than the rear. That's for aerodynamics. The roof, fiberglass for lightweight, keeps center of gravity low. Very clever idea. Move the tail lights up here where people can actually see them because the car is so low. The pneumatic suspension, we'll get into that in just a minute. And this is, to this day, the most comfortable car ever built. I don't believe there's a Rolls-Royce or a Mercedes-Benz or any other car that rides as comfortably as this. It was not built to be a Nürburgring car, certainly. The only letdown in this car was the engine. When this car was designed, the idea was to use a six-cylinder water-cooled flat six, much like a Porsche 911. Well, it just got a little too expensive, and they went to their tried and true water-cooled four-cylinder. A very safe car. In the event of an accident, this was the first car where the engine in a crash would go under the car. If you hit the front end, it would literally go down under the car and not come into the passenger compartment and kill people. It's just a fascinating automobile. I'm going to change a tire later. I'm going to show you how you change a tire in this. You can do it without using any jacks. It's really fascinating. This big aluminum hood here, this is the single largest aluminum pressing of any automobile up to this point. It may still be to this day, I don't think so, but up to this point it was. So there was a lot of innovation with these. When they came to America, the problem was Citroën did not have the mechanics and the servicing. You know, you send this down to your local gas station and Clem comes in with his American wrenches and starts working on it, and that's pretty much the end of this car. It is complicated, but it's only complicated if you've worked on traditional cars. Once you study this and look at it, it all makes perfect sense. Now let's open the hood. Let's show you the engine. Let's take a look. Have to open it from each side. Okay, looks a little scary, but it's really not. It's pretty straightforward. It's a front-wheel drive automobile. I don't know if I mentioned that. 4 speeds on the column. It also had something called Citromatic, which was their version of an automatic transmission, which was quite innovative as well. It wasn't a full automatic. This particular model has air conditioning, even though it's a 71. Air conditioning was not available on these till 72, but I found a wrecked car and I took the unit and the dashboard and put it in this car, so that's why it looks the way it does. As you can see, you've got a shroud here because the air comes out from underneath and comes up here and cools the motor. This model has just a little under 2.2 liters. It's not a big motor, it's not an extremely powerful car, but because of its aerodynamics, it can maintain high speeds for long periods of time. It gets pretty good gas mileage considering it's a big car that can hold 4 or 5 people. I think 112 miles an hour was the end of the world for these. But that's really all you need. But it's not, you know, nowadays so many cars have to do so many different things. They've got to handle, they've got to do this. This car was built to be comfortable, and that's what it does. You'll see when we go over bumps. In fact, I'm going to show you an ad. This is an ad for Citroën suspension. This is like the weirdest ad. There's like a fish in it, and it looks like the guy was on acid when he did it. But here, take a look at the commercial. I mean, I get what they're trying to say in that commercial. It's just such an odd sort of thing. See, this is the whole suspension idea of this car is based on the fact that you can compress a gas, but not a liquid. So see, well here's a diagram of what one of these spheres looks like. Okay, these spheres, you have liquid and gas, and the liquid acts as a damper, you know, for suspension, whereas the gas provides the springing effect because you can compress a gas, and that's basically all there is to it. You see, you've got them here throughout the car. There's one there, and they run everything, including your brakes. That's another thing I'll show you in a minute. There's no brake pedal on this car. You have a button on the floor which you just sort of touch, and that kind of slows you down. You can tell when people drive one of these for the first time because they go like this, bouncing down the road. And you can adjust the suspension and raise or lower it. If you see a giant puddle or snow, you can bring it all the way up, and then you can lower it all the way down for the highway. And then we'll change a tire later. I'll show you how you change a tire using just without using a jack. The car lifts itself up, and you put a jack stand under it. Well, I'll show you that in a minute. Another really cool thing are the Citroen headlights. I'll show you something they do that I think is very smart. You know, a lot of cars like Jags and whatnot in the 60s had covered headlights, and it would get dirty in here, you know, or it'd get cloudy. Well, how do you clean that? You really can't. Well, what Citroen did, can you see? They put a little door here. You can put your hand in there and clean the inside of the window. How simple is that? Very clever, very clever. And this has, because the car can go up and down on suspension, the headlights will also adjust depending on the height of the car. And the headlights turn with the wheels. Now, this was stupidly illegal here in America because in America you had to have fixed headlights because that was the law. But this one's been retrofitted. And it's just done with cables. As the wheels turn, the headlights can follow you around a corner. This was a big selling point in the Citroen. In fact, here's a European ad showing the turning headlights. And listen to the bongo music. Very cool, very 60s. Yeah, check it out. If you do have one of these, you want to make sure you use only the Citroen, I think it's the green LHM fluid. And don't use automatic transmission fuel. You can't use oil. Don't use anything else, or you'll ruin the entire car. You have to use the fluid that they recommend. But other than that, they're pretty bulletproof. Here, let's close this up. Look how light that is. I mean, the whole car doesn't weigh anything. But this is the real selling point of the DS, or the goddess as they call this in France. But see, when you sit in one of these for the first time, it's like getting in your favorite easy chair. Look at this thing. It just kind of wraps its arms around you. This is the most comfortable car. Your biggest problem is falling asleep while you're driving. I mean, it's that comfortable. The floor is padded. There's this much foam on the floor, so you can it's just fantastic. But there's no brake pedal. There's a little bulb on the floor. It looks like a windshield washer button, and you just touch it. You just apply the slightest amount of pressure to the floor, and the car stops. It's really almost the exact opposite of a lot of American style cars where you just need to kind of manhandle a little bit. There's not a lot of road feel. It's just you just sort of, after a while, you begin to sense what the car is doing. You don't even feel speed bumps when you go up in this car because of the suspension. And of course, this was very unusual, having just the one stalk here instead of having 3 or 4. You can see the dashboard clearly. You know, a lot of times in a car you're driving and you have to turn the wheel to see where you are. Whereas this one, you always have a perfect view of the gauges. Come on, I'll show you the back seat and the trunk. The back seat just as comfortable as the front seat. This one has the shades. This is a popular option in France, to have these window shades here. Keeps the sun off the leather on the back there, but they kind of rattle it a little bit when you go down the road. You've got a nice full-size trunk, all kinds of room, and this is all you need to change a tire. Let me show you how this works. First thing you want to do is raise the suspension. Now see, this car is cold. Had I been driving it now, it would have gone up in a second. But since it sat overnight, it took a little extra time. Okay, set the parking brake. Dun, da 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 dun. Okay, we set it there. Now we set it down. Give it a minute, and voila! Both wheels are off the ground. I know what you're thinking, but what if you have a flat tire in the back with that fender? How do you get it off? No problem, monsieur. How clever is this? All you do is one bolt. Voila! You change the tire. Oh, very clever, eh, monsieur? Not bad. Look at that. Could it be simpler? I'll put this fender back on. We'll take this thing for a ride, and I'll tell you how this car saved the life of the president of France. It's a fascinating story. In fact, they even made a movie about it. It was called Day of the Jackal. Let me put this on and we'll go for a spin. Is it the greatest car of the 20th century? I think you can make a strong case for it. It just has so many innovative features in one vehicle, which never happens. You know, most manufacturers get a little scared. They try one new thing, but okay, let's keep everything else by the book. Whereas this, everything was innovative about it. You know, it's funny, so many cars now are about high performance and all these other things. There aren't many cars that are just about comfort, and oh my God, this is so comfortable. You know, when I tell people it's the most comfortable car in the world, they go, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, right. And then they sit and they go, oh my God, if you ever get a chance to sit in one of these, you gotta do it. You won't believe it. It's like riding on a cloud. It just floats along. It's not boaty like, you know, some of those mid-60s American cars. It's a combination of soft and firm at the same time. It's hard to explain unless you actually experience it. You've got rack and pinion steering, hydraulically assisted, or hydropneumatically assisted, I guess you'd call it. I love the thin A-pillar here and the big wide panoramic windscreen. You know, as much as I like the Corvettes and the muscle cars, sometimes it's fun just to have a nice quiet ride, kind of glide along.
There's so many books out about the Citroën. You know, they're not only in automotive publications, but in art books, because it's really seen as a piece of French culture. This is probably the most beloved car in France. This and maybe the 2CV. You notice the wheels bouncing up and down, but the body doesn't move. They built about, I think, 1,600,000 in some of these cars, which is pretty amazing considering the time. It was not an inexpensive car. During its lifespan, they sold over 1.6 million of them. That's pretty amazing. And these were exported all over the world. They were built in England as well. Now this particular car here is a 4-speed. They didn't make a 5-speed model. And if I ever find one of those transmissions, I'll put it in here. Because at really high speeds, 90, 95, the engine's a little buzzy. So it'd be nice to have that 5th gear just to bring the revs down. You'll notice some of the early Citroëns were single headlight models. A gentleman named Robert Opron, I hope I'm saying his name right, he's the guy that designed the Citroën SM, which is another masterpiece. Uses the same basic technology except using a V6 Maserati engine. He did the restyle on this car. He did the dual headlights and the headlights that turn. That was all his idea as well. The French really engineer and think differently than the rest of us, and thank God for them. Germany was the birthplace of the car, but France was the nursery. And all the great engineering ideas came out of the French, you know, Système de Pinard and all that kind of stuff. It's really fascinating. But as you can see, although this is not a fast car, you can travel this road at reasonably high speeds because it handles so nicely. Now this is a very bumpy road normally, and I don't feel the bumps at all in this thing. André Citroën, he was quite a guy. He wanted to be the Henry Ford of France, and in some ways he was, but in a lot of ways he wasn't. He was a he was a womanizer and a gambler, and he eventually lost the company. But he was very progressive. I believe he had health care and women workers when that was not usually allowed in a lot of European countries. So he was quite progressive that way. The logo for Citroën is interesting, those two chevrons. I'm told André Citroën got that idea from some helical cut gears that mesh together, and that's sort of what the two chevrons mean. One cool thing about this car, let's say you get a flat tire and you don't have a spare, you can drive it away on 3 wheels. Because you can lift up one wheel and just go along. It's not the safest way to drive, but it'll get you off the road. French cars are all about driving with as little effort as possible. And you don't have to put a lot of effort into driving French cars for the most part. Panhard, Citroën, Peugeot. For some reason, the French, maybe because their roads are so good, I don't know why it is, but they just have the most comfortable riding cars of anybody. This car saved the life of the President of France. There's a group in France called the OAS, and they had planned a couple of assassination attempts against President de Gaulle. They were mad because they felt President de Gaulle had betrayed France by giving Algeria back to the Algerians. On October 22nd, 1962, 12 gunmen opened fire on the president's Citroën. The president and his wife were coming back from Orly Airport. They were traveling 70 miles an hour. The car was hit with 140 bullets. Rear window shattered, all 4 tires blown out, 2 motorcycle security guards killed, and yet the chauffeur was able to drive the car at high speed with 4 blown out tires thanks to this very sophisticated suspension system. And from that point on, President de Gaulle named this car the official car of France. He vowed he would never ride in any other car again. And as far as I know, he was true to his word. That's why this car has become a national treasure in France. As you can see, it handles these windy roads very nicely. Certainly better than any, well, almost 60-year-old car has a right to do. But just because the car is comfortable doesn't mean it doesn't handle. It does handle, it just handles differently. Some people call this the most beautiful car ever made. I don't know if I would call it beautiful. If you own one, I think you think it's beautiful because you get so taken in by, you get so seduced by the car. It's unusual looking, and it becomes more beautiful, you know? To give you a perspective of what the car is like behind the wheel, you've got a panoramic windscreen, of course, thin A-pillars, nothing blocks your vision. Your mirror's mounted down low, which is kind of unusual, but that's French. I love, you have 3 pods here. This one, you can test your gauges here. This will flash if your fluid level is low, oil pressure, alternator. If anything fails, that will flash. This is your gas gauge right here. Speedometer, and inside the speedometer there's a little wheel that it tells you your stopping distance at whatever speed you're going at, how many feet you need to stop. I don't know why you'd be looking at that when you slam on the brakes, but it's there anyway. Anyway, you can reset your tripometer and your odometer is right there. This is your tachometer. This is your water temperature. Radio, of course, French radio. This car has air conditioning. I found a wrecked 72 car that had air conditioning, and I pulled the dash out of it, and I put it on here so it would integrate nicely. They did not have air conditioning in 71 when this car came out, but I adapted it to this car, and it works great. The heating controls are very confusing, but things slide and turn the heat on or off as you would any other car that way. But as you can see, almost no effort is required to steer this car. And it actually goes pretty good. I mean, we're going at a pretty good clip for a road like this. And of course, your 4-speed on the column right here. Right now I'm in 3rd gear. Drop down to 4th gear. There you go, like that. They even rallied these cars, and they did quite well. Give you an idea how fast we're going. We lost the camera crew. They're back there somewhere. You got your clock right here. And of course, being French, you gotta have a cigarette lighter. Oh my God, you gotta have that. If there's any criticism of this car, engine gets a little bit buzzy on the freeway. At 70, you're turning a shade over 3,000 RPM. It's not bad, but I think the 5-speed would be an improvement. But it's still very smooth. Notice how it just does this over the bump. It's amazing. I'm surprised more manufacturers didn't license this Citroen suspension system. You know, it's a shame more Americans never got a chance to experience the Citroën. You know, Citroën were wonderful engineers. They built wonderful cars. They just didn't know how to run a dealer network, at least in the United States. You know, most of the really good Citroën mechanics are independent guys. But even back in the day, I worked at a dealership where we carried Citroën as a kid, and you know, parts were always late, they never came, there was a strike, whatever it was. And consequently, customers got extremely frustrated. That combined with the fact that a lot of customers would take it to their local gas station and have that mechanic try and do the work on it. That's what sort of doomed them. They got a reputation for being undependable, but you know, my Citroën SM's got 120,000 miles on it. I haven't had any problems. This one has got, what has it got? 78, 80,000 on it. Nothing really too bad. So it's like anything else. You maintain it properly, you use Citroën fluid, and it'll run forever. The only thing this car can't do, sadly, is a burnout. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little trip down the Champs-Élysées, so to speak. This is just a wonderful piece of French artwork. It's just such a fantastic, amazing car. I hope you all get a chance to experience one of these cars sometime, at least ride in one or drive in one. But this is why they say Vive la France. It's just a terrific automobile. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.